Pranam Arpit Bhai, Pranam Yashir. How are you guys?
Good, good. Pranam, pranam.
Pranam, pranam.
Arpit, I'm going to answer your questions about Japan like after this, okay?
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
Okay, let's begin. It's 3:05 p.m. Pranam to everyone. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Vajrayanam, Namo Vaisavvasamanam, Eso Panchanamukkaro Sarva Bhava Pranasano, Mangalanam to Sabesam, Padamam Bhava Mangalam. Namo Durvara Ragadi Varivara Nivarine, Arhate Yoginathaya Mahaviraya Tayine, Pannage Cha Surendra Cha Koshike Pada Sanspashe, Nirvishesha Manaskaya Shri Veera Samane Namo. We've been looking at Sri Panchasutra Granth. Panchasutra, which is composed of 5 different sutras, and each sutra has a different theme. Each sutra is one step ahead of the previous sutra, and in this manner, 5 milestones to attain moksha are outlined in this Granth Sri Panchasutra. Now, the first sutra of Sri Panchasutra contains, as we saw, a detailed guideline as to how a person attains the gun of dharma. Because in the past we have attained a lot of dharmic elements, but they have remained in their dravyanik shape. They haven't really given us the effect that they should in terms of the bhav. Which is why the Kari Bhagwant showed us 3 different ways to fasten the process by which we can attain dharma, and that is by way of uh, Chatusharan Gaman, seeking refuge in Arihant Paramatma, Siddha Paramatma, Sadhu Bhagwants, and the dharma shown by Jineshwar Paramatma. Secondly, doing ninda continuously of all the bad deeds that we have done in the past, resolving not to do them again. And thirdly, doing anumodana of all the good deeds that have been done by everyone, including ourselves. Having done this, the Shravak over a period of time, the Jeev over a period of time attains dharma, and having attained this quality of dharma, he thinks to himself that this dharma is something that I have come across in a rarest of the rare situation, and it is very difficult to come across this dharma. And now that I have come across it, I should do everything possible to preserve it. So, while speaking of dharma here, the Tikakar Bhagwant clarified, and also the Granthkar Bhagwant, that we're talking of the Desh Virti Dharma, that is the Shravak Dharma in the form of Anuvrats, Gunvrats, and Shiksha Vrats, the 12 Vrats of a Shravak essentially, which comprises all Dharma of a Shravak. The Tikakar Bhagwant, in his Tika, asks a question on behalf of the disciple saying, why have you first shown Deshwarti Dharma, not Sadhu Dharma? Because Sadhu Dharma is the way to moksha, and Sadhu Dharma should be shown first. And in several other Granths, we see that it is Sadhu Dharma that should, that should be first propounded, and only then, when people are unable to accept and practice Sadhu Dharma, one must show Deshwarti Dharma. So while this is true, the Tikakar Bhagwant, by way of even calculations, they show that to attain Deshwarti Dharma, you need a smaller Kshayopsham after attaining Samyak Darshan, as opposed to the Kshayopsham required to attain Sarvavrti Dharma. And thus, for most Jeeves, it is the natural course that they will first attain Deshwarti Dharma and only then attain Sarvavrti Dharma. Hence, in this Granth, Deshwarti Dharma has been spoken about first. And so the Shravak takes upon this Dharma. Now, in order to protect, preserve, and enhance this Dharma, there are several ways that that he needs to practice. There are several changes that he brings in his life, and we saw a couple of those. The last we were talking about is related to one of the first things that we saw. The first point was Vajjija Adhamma Mitta Jogam. Get rid of the company of Adharma Mitras. And in this manner, when a person gets rid of the company of Adharma Mitras, it is very imperative to understand that when Adharma Mitras exit our life, we get rid of sins accumulating in 2 ways. One is by way of their mere company. That is, when you are present in their company, or when you live with them, when you reside with them, or when you live around them, or socially speaking, everything that they do, which is because they are Adharma Mitras, this will include kriyas of extreme ashra. By our very presence there, and by our lack of rejection, by a lack of dissent, we are engaging in karma bandh by way of anumati. And secondly speaking, uh, as we saw in the case of Shripal and Maina's previous births, the mere rag that we have towards friends, and Dharma Mitras could be anyone. This could be not only friends, it could be any relationship that we have in this world. The mere rag towards these entities would mean that every activity that they do, we also have a partial karma bandh accruing thereof. So, in both ways, it is essential and imperative to get rid of adharma mitras, which is why later in the Granth again, the Granthkar Bhagwan comes back and he talks about how dharma mitras are worth, are worth serving. How dharma mitras, you should always be in the company of dharma mitras. And four examples were given to show the importance of dharma mitras, that is Kalyan mitras, and 5 steps were shown. Uh, this is us to build context for what we're going to discuss now. And therein we saw Sevijya Dhamma Mite Vihanenam, always do sevan of the company of Dharma Mitras. So, firstly, one must be filled with Bahuman towards these Dharma Mitras. Um, 5 terms we saw: Bahumana Juttesiya, Ana Kankhi, Ana Paditchage, Ana Avirahage, Ana Nipfayageti. One must be filled with Bahuman towards the Dharma Mitras, towards the Kalyan Mitras. One must always be Agniya Kankshi. One must always be on their toes and keep on requesting the Kalyan Mitra that they have. What more can I do? What Agnya do you have for me in my life? What can I do to practice things better? Or given this stage and this circumstances and this situation that I'm in, what is the best possible thing for me to do? The third we saw is Ana Paditchage Siya, Ana Paditchage. That is when the Kalyan Mitra actually directs this particular friend, uh, he must accept it by way of tahati. He must accept it, because it is simple that the Kalyan Mitra who is giving such an agnya has given such an agnya considering the circumstances that this particular person is. So with that, he also knows that this is fit for this particular person, and he will only direct him to do something which he's capable of doing, right? So there is not something that will be beyond his measure. He may think it's beyond his capacity, but the Kalyan Mitra would know him better. The fourth is Agnya, being Agnya Aviradhak, ensuring that the Agnya of the Dharma Mitra is not violated. And the fifth one is being Agnya Nishpadak, ensuring that it is completed successfully and with extreme excitement. Yes, absolutely. And for the most part, in the Panchasutra, we've been looking at Kalyan Mitras in the form of Guru Bhagwans. In the first sutra itself, we saw Kalyana Mitra Guru Bhagwanta Vayana Joge. And in I think about 3 or 4 iterations, it refers to Guru Bhagwans as Param Kalyan Mitra. So there is no doubt about it. This is mainly in context of Guru Bhagwans only, and also extends to other relationships. Identifying Kalyan Mitras and the qualities of Kalyan Mitras is pretty simple. A person who has understood the Sarup of Dharma to a good degree, he can tell by a very good guess if a particular person for him is his Kalyan Mitra or not. A person that propels you to to practice further ashram in life. The person who engages you in further in activities which further your sansar is obviously an Adharma Mitra and a Kalyan Mitra. And a person who saves you from that, or a person who pushes you towards dharma, by any measure possible, is a person's Kalyan Mitra, Dharma Mitra. To identify that, the characteristics are pretty simple. It would be the characteristics of a person who knows dharma, or in certain cases it could also be that the Kalyan Mitra for a particular person is not paripakva, so they're not considering that. A lot of us could have very good friends who are all like-minded and who are all engaging in dharma. They're all our Kalyan Mitras for sure. But when we're talking of, when we're understanding it in context of the 5 terms that are given here, that is, accepting the Agni of a Kalyan Mitra, seeking the Agni of a Kalyan Mitra, it refers to those Kalyan Mitras who are Bahushrit and Gitarth, more or less speaking. So, having understood this, the next Sutrakar, the next theme that the Sutrakar Bhagavan addresses here is that, and in this manner, by serving the Agnya of the Kalyan Mitra, of the Dharma Mitra, a Shravak, he becomes an entity with Parishuddha Anushthan. So every Anushthan that he does is not only Shuddh, it is not only pure, but it is Parishuddha, it's pure from all sides. It is holistically pure. Because virtually speaking, if a person has made their choice very wisely and very well, there will be no distinction between the Agnya of a Kalyan Mitra, of a Dharma Mitra, and the Agnya of Tirthankar Bhagwant, because both are the same thing. It might often so happen, and we've seen previously that the Guru Bhagwant might direct a particular Shishya uh, to do a particular deed which is seemingly in contradiction to Jinagnya. He might say, go walk over that moss and get me a pail of water. And this could be the case. Not speaking this has happened. There are several examples in the scriptures also wherein the Guru Bhagwan has directed the Shishya to do something which is seemingly savadya, which seemingly involves an element of hinsa, but this has only been for the betterment, for the spiritual welfare of the particular Shishya. So the Agni of a Guru, even if it is in seemingly contradiction with Janagnya, it is in the form of Janagnya, more or less speaking. Obviously, this doesn't mean that anything that any Guru Bhagwan says is to be accepted. The distinction between all of these types is very well outlined in Guru Tattva Vinishchay by Upadhyaji Bhagwan. So, if anyone has any questions, we can refer to that and have a clear bifurcation among these things. So, uh, the Shravak becomes one with Parishuddha Anushtan. Any activity he does, even if it is tiny, becomes one that is pure from all sides. And having accepted these dharma guns, that is the gun of dharma in the form of Deshwarti dharma, he acts in accordance with these dharma guns. So, in accordance with that, three things. There are three yogs that the Atma has, that is Man, Vachan, and Kaya. And these yogs are also, broadly speaking, the cause of karma bandh for most of us. So, as soon as the Shravak attains dharma, his Man, Vachan, and Kaya also become Parishud. The Kriyas that he does with Man, Vachan, Kaya also become Parishud. And with this mind, speech, and body, he engages even in the conduct of a householder. So, even though he cannot take Diksha and he's in the sansar, and as a result of that, he has to do sansaric activities, that doesn't mean that his mind becomes completely colored by the hues of the sansar while he's in the sansar, and when he goes to a dharma sthanak, his mind becomes colored with the hues of dharma. In fact, the color of dharma is something that has stained his heart completely. And even when he is engaging in the activities of the sansar, the Sutrakar Bhavan very clearly specifies the dasha of the Shravak. He says that this Shravak is Parisuddha Mana Kiriye, Parisuddha Vai Kiriye, Parisuddha Kai Kiriye. So any activity of the Manashan Kaya that he does is with a Parishud Man, Vachan, and Kaya. Alright. So the Sutrakar Bhagwan further says, he specifies this in what way he can avoid doing kriyas that are not that would taint his heart and not make it parishud. And to make this more specific, he gives a few examples what a Shravak should abstain from. So the first thing that he says is, he refers to karmadan. We all know that there are 15 karmadans: Ingal karma, Van karma, Sadi karma, Bhatak karma, etc. And these are outlined in Vanditu Sutra, and they are further elaborated in the Tika of Vanditu Sutra known as the Arsadipika Tika, which is made by Ratnashekhar Sri Shri Maharaja. Now, the first thing that a Shravak should abstain from here is mentioned that karma dans, which involve a heavy killing of several jeeves, which are disgusting, condemnable, and which involve a lot of conflict of mind, bahu kilesam, that is, they involve a very intense parinam of rag and dvesh. You need to have, or rather, when you engage in such activities, your mental state becomes one of conflict. It becomes one of intense rag and dvesh. Further, it injures or it damages your chances of going to a good place in Parlok. That is, if you engage in karma dan, securing a good future, good afterlife for you is also something that is endangered, and which is why a Shravak should abstain from the 15 karma dans. Now, these karma dans they're broadly expounded in several scriptures in addition to Anjata Sutra as well, it would be advisable that we have a look at these scriptures and get a consolidated view of what the scriptures say, because there's a very there's a lot of confusion of sorts as to what karmadans are, what is their ambit, and when we talk of engaging in karmadans, to what extent are we talking about? So, for instance, let's take the example of oil. Now, engaging in the production of oil by uh, by crushing grains, or by crushing oil seeds, or employing animals to do this, or perhaps the example of a goldsmith or a blacksmith, wherein you operate the furnace, you're the one who's melting all these metals and making ornaments of gold, silver, etc. Now, in all of these cases, it is important to understand that the final product that is obtained as a result of these activities, when it is sold by a third party to you and you buy it, you do not become party to the karmadan directly. However, when you're engaging in it yourself, when you're assisting someone engaging in it, or you're doing anumodana of it, and this anumodana could also be that in the form of you buying a product which is received from these karmadans, and then you do anumodana of that product, you become extremely attached to that product. In that way also you are contributing to the karmadan. But the mere purchase of that particular product and the mere usage of that particular product will not result in this particular consumer being liable to the karmadan, because if that were the case, every other thing that you see around you is made using one type of karmadan or the other. Everything, more or less speaking. There's nothing that comes to mind which wouldn't involve a karmadan. So the Shastrakar Bhagavans also take note that there will always be people in this world who are going to engage in these karmadans, because these are the needs of the society. But for a Jain to engage in these karmadans is not something that is conceivable. There will always be people who play their part, and this is the case for every other thing. A lot of people often raise questions like, and they all follow the same line of argument, which is, if you actually see very hollow, such as if everyone takes Diksha, who will give Kochri? Or you talk about not sending soldiers to fight for your borders. So if everyone if everyone refrains from participating in the army, then who's going to secure the borders of the nation? Or similarly, in case of other karmadans as well, that is, if you talk of not engaging in all of these trades, not engaging in the work of a goldsmith or a silversmith or a cobbler or a farmer, who will make these products? Because even back then these products existed. So it's very important to understand that these karmadans are going to be there. They have been there for time immemorial now, and they're going to be there. And this is regardless of whether or not we as Shravaks participate in them or not, right? So it's important to understand that we secure our own gati by not participating in them. I recall the video that I shared in the group yesterday. I'm referring to the video that was held on Mahavir Swami Bhagwan's Janma Kalyanak, wherein this Acharya Bhagwan Pragna Sagar ji, he very explicitly and rather surprisingly mentioned, he was narrating slogans, and one of them was Krishi Bano ya Rishi Bano. You become a farmer or a saint. Now, such a Sadhu Bhagwan is only concerned with promoting Arshatva, with promoting monkhood. But to suggest that you become a farmer if not a saint is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that Adinath Bhagwan, and he further substantiates it by saying that Adinath Bhagwan has shown the art of farming. Well, Rishabh Raja or King Rishabh in his Grahast Avastha had to do it because that is the kalp or the achar of the first Tirthankar in an Avsarpini. That doesn't mean that these things are nirvadya or free of hinsa, which is why as soon as this particular king took Diksha and attained Kevalyan and became the first Tirthapati, Bhagwant in his very first Deshna, he declares all of these activities of the Sansara Savadya, which means that essentially speaking, they are all Savadya in their very nature. And to promote it is not something that is appropriate even for a Shravak. And this is what the Granthkar clearly says, that one should refrain from karma dance. Secondly, a Shravak should not think of any, engage in any thought process which talks of hurting other jeeves. Na chintejya parapidam. Anything that causes pida or injury to other jeeves, you should not engage in a thought process like that, because such a thought process is in the form of the first of the four types of Raudradhyan. And as we all know, Raudradhyan is the cause of Narak Gati. The third direction that the Sutrakar Bhagavan gives here is na gachejya harisam. And here the Sutrakar Bhagavan says that no matter what happens, you should not experience or engulf yourself in a sense of, pettiness or helplessness. Oh, look at me, I'm so destitute, there is no help available for me, there is no company that I have. A Shravak should not engage in such a thought. He should always, in fact, he should think the same things but without dinta, that I am alone and this is because my nature is to be alone. Ego me sasa vappa, as we say in the Santhara Porasi. And there also the word that is mentioned is evam adina manuso appana manusasai. A Shravak should teach his Atma that, listen, you are alone, you have come alone and you will go alone, but there is no need to feel helpless about it. And in this manner, he teaches the Atma to be self-reliant, to be self-confident without any feeling of dinta. Because there are two ways you can say that I'm alone, like we've discussed before. Or even a beggar can say that I'm alone, I have nothing or no one, give me something. And even a Mahatma can say the same thing. But there'll be a huge difference, a stark difference between the thought process of the two. And then the Sutrakar Bhagavan says, na seveja vitaha bhinivesam. You should not engage in excessive joy. You should not engage in excessive in false pride, because everything that you think is yours is truly not yours. And then the Granthkar Bhagavan says, in this way, so by way of restraining your mind in these manners, these are just examples. This is not an exhaustive list. One must restrain the mind and direct the mind in an appropriate process. We saw in the last session that those who talk about, not thinking altogether are not speaking in accordance with the Jain Shasan, because shutting your mind off is like becoming Jad from Chetan. It is the very defining characteristic of a Chetan Padarth to think, to constantly engage your mind in some thought or the other. It is virtually impossible to shut your mind. The mind only gets destroyed when a person becomes Vitrag and Sarvagnya. So, it is important to streamline the thoughts of your mind in accordance with the directions laid out in the scripture and others. So this is the case of the mind. Now, secondly, in case of the vachan, a Shravak should not, say something that is false. So he plans things in a way, he carries out his business, and by business I mean every daily activity that he goes about, in a way that he doesn't. Right. So, Shaz, Vitrag Paramatma, upon destroying the four Aghati karmas, they destroy the Mano Yoga as well. When a person is Vitrag and Sarvagnya, as long as they are Sayogi Kevli, they have the Mano Yoga. But as soon as they enter the 14 Gunastanok, even the Sukshma and Badar Mano Yoga is destroyed. So, now, so the second defining quality that we saw was with respect to the Vachan Yoga, that is speech. And we were looking at how a Shravak should go about doing things that he doesn't have an opportunity or any occasion to lie at all. So, no matter what happens. Okay. So the question is, how does he answer Indra's doubts? Now, Kevali Bhagwant, when he attains Keval Gyan, the purpose of the man as such is destroyed, because man is like an aid to think only for Chadmas Jeev. For those who have attained Vitrag and Sarvagnyata, the man just acts as a useless thing. Just like there are the 5 indriyas that we have, and we see with our eyes, but and we touch things by the way of the Sparshindriya. But the Kevali Bhagwant does not use any Indriyas to to perceive anything, because their Gyan is capable enough. The Atma's Gyan is so powerful that there is no need to use Indriyas or Man to do anything at all. Just like when you have clear vision, there is no need for you to put glasses on, right? So, which is why the Shastrakar Bhagwants describe Kevali Bhagwants as a Manasta Yogi. Now, when it comes to resolving, resolving Indra's questions, or the questions of an Anuttarvasi Devta, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the concept. Uh, Anuttarvasi Devtas are on the top of this world, just below Siddhashila, and they are the highest form of Devlok ever. So when we talk of Sansarik Sukh, the most extreme form of materialistic happiness is present in the Sarvat Siddhaman, in the Anuttar Vimans. These Devtas spend their entire lifetime of 33 Sagropam turning from, so they're only an arm's length long, and they they lie on one side of their, of their bed for 6 months, and after 6 months they turn again, and they keep on switching sides. And all that they do, their luxury knows no bounds, their joy knows no bounds, and all that they do in this lifespan is do swadhyay of everything that they have learnt in their previous birth. Only those who take diksha and those who practice sarag sayam take birth, or take chavan in this devlok. Now, when these devtas do swadhyay and they have some questions, what they do is they, and this is interesting to know how Jainism talks about the mind and how it thinks. We'll discuss more of that later. But for the present purpose, whenever we think about something, or whenever we form a thought, it will be any thought whatsoever. There are two things, okay? So there is something known as man, and this man is in the form of Dravyaman and Bhavman. Dravyaman is in the form of Pudgalic activity, whereas Bhavman, although connected to Dravyaman, is an extension of the Atma's faculty. When a particular Jeev thinks, the thoughts of that particular Jeev, they are arranged, the Atma of the Jeev grabs Pudgal from the atmosphere, and by grabbing these Pudgal of Manovargana, they arrange these Pudgals in a specific shape. So for every thought that you have, there is a specific shape of Pudgals taking place, changing every now and then in your mind, in the Dravyaman. And Kevali Bhagwans, by virtue of their Keval Gyan, they know the. So this is why when we talk of Mana Paryav Gyan also, the fourth Gyan, what Mana Paryav Gyanis can do is that by seeing the arrangement of these Pudgals of the Dravyaman, they can tell what the person is thinking. And that's how these Mahatmas read a person's mind. So Tirthankar Paramatmas, they have Keval Gyan, and they immediately know what a person's thinking without having to resort to anything else whatsoever. When they understand the query of the Anuttarvasi Devtas, the Tirthankar Paramatmas in their own mind, they actively form a particular thought in this particular shape. And Anuttarvasi Devtas, they read that particular arrangement and they get their answer from Bhagwan in this manner. Alright? So, there it is not that Paramatma is using his mind to think or whatsoever. The mind is present, and Paramatma doesn't use it for the purpose of creating any thought of for understanding any particular thing. Paramatma, by way of his Tirthankar Nam Karma, does upkar on these Anuttarvasi Devas by answering their questions. Does that make sense, Shreyans?
Yes, I got it. Thank you.
So, so Shravak, he does not do Mrusha Bhashan, he does not speak falsely. He arranges things in a way that he doesn't have occasion to. Now, even if he has to speak the truth, he won't say it in a way that it inflicts injury upon the other person, which means that the truth should also be soft, it shouldn't be harsh. Secondly, because a Shravak's mind is filled with compassion, anything that he will say will only be something that is to further that compassion and not to make his heart rock-hearted. So, in addition to speaking only the truth, he should also not engage in gossip or in revealing secrets about someone else, or engaging in unnecessary slander, or further even engaging in vikathas, that is ahar katha, desh katha, stri katha, etc. But unfortunately, most of us, even though we have a lot of time free, we actively go out of our way to listen to and talk about desh katha, bhakt katha, and stri katha. And it is so sorrowful that today, when we in Dharmasthanaks also, these four kathas have started, vikathas have they started entering. So, in this manner, the Shravak tames his mind, his vachan. And lastly speaking, by way of kaya, a Shravak should not do anything that, uh, or he tries his best not to do anything which involves the hints of Prithvikai, Apkai, Devkai, Vaukai, Vanaspatikai, and Traskai. So, the intention here is that the Shravak is only a Shravak when he is desirous of sadhu dharma. Any Shravak who is not desirous of sadhu dharma is not a Shravak. We reiterate this for the 100th time because it is important to understand. And this sutra that we're looking at is Sadhu Dharma Paribhavana Sutra, the sutra of reflecting on reflecting on the Sadhu Dharma, preparing oneself for the Sadhu Dharma. And although this sutra talks of preparation for Sadhu Dharma, all it talks about is Shravak Dharma, which means both are the same thing. So, because a Shravak is desirous of becoming a Sadhu, sooner or later, even though the arrangement of things in the sansar is such that you have to engage in violence to run your sansar, he will try his level best to abstain from everything that he can do to to cut off unnecessary killing of these chakaijis. Furthermore, a Shravak will not take anything that does not belong to someone else. And this is uh, this not only refers to not stealing, it refers to not taking something that has not been given by the owner as well. Uh, if there is a parastri, a woman that is not his, and for women, a husband or a spouse that's not theirs, they would look at that person with their eyes down, or not look at them in the first place, withdraw their eyesight if they accidentally cast a glance upon them, and practice brahmacharya in this manner. And he wouldn't engage in any activity of anarthadand, which causes abdhyan. Anarthadand activities are very well listed in the scriptures. This includes everything from traveling, touring, watching plays, watching movies, playing games, all sins that are not essential to survival. And even if the Shravak has luxuries available for entertaining himself, for spending time in leisure, uh, and he can't stop himself from engaging in them altogether, he will ensure that he always keeps Bhagwan's vachan in mind. So, which is why whenever a Shravak enters in any activity of calm, he'll remember the words of Paramatma, and that Paramatma has described calm as a shalya, a thorn which keeps on piercing you deeper and deeper if you don't remove it at the right time. So even when a Shravak engages in some activity of bhog, it could be not necessarily sexual pleasures, but also pleasures of all the five senses. A Shravak will always do it in a way that he immediately does it and he withdraws himself from it, as if it were a medicine to a disease which can't be cured in any other way. All right, and in this manner, Shravak practices his life. Now, and this is a very important thing that a lot of us aren't aware of, the Sutragar Bhagwans also realized that the primary plinth of Shravak Dharma is Arth, which is wealth. And we all know that Sadhu Bhagwans are not supposed to give Updesh of furthering Arth, which is a Upadari Bhavant in the Savaso Gathanustavan. He says, Arthani Deshana Je Diye, Olave Dharmana Granthare, Parama Padano Pragata Chorate, Tehathi Kemavahi Shiva Panthare. That sadhu who shows ways to make money. A sadhu Bhagwant who says, come to me, I'll show you how to make a good investment, blah, blah, blah. Or you give dan in so and so kshetra and you will reap 10 times or 100 times as much. All of these are ways of making arth. And Upajaji Bhagwan very strictly in this gatha says that a sadhu or a Guru Bhagwan, a Kuguru Bhagwan who gives deshna of arth in this manner, he hides the parts of the agams. He hides the excerpts of the agams. And then such a person because he's hiding the truth in the agams. Upajaji Bhagan says, Paramapadano pragata chorate. He is robbing people of moksha in broad daylight. He's a thief. Tehathi Kimavahishva Panthare. When gurus like these dominate the Sangh or when they dominate the community, how will Bhagwan's Marg continue to flourish? It's a genuine worry that Upajaji Bhagan expressed then. So, now as opposed to this, Sutrakar Paramatma or Sutrakar Bhagwant here, Chirantanacharya Bhagwant, he directs and he understands that it is because of earth that a Shravak engages in calm. Because if there is no earth, there will be no calm. All sensual pleasures more or less are related to earth. And the sansar also is founded on earth. You can't survive without wealth in this world. Which is why, of all the 4 types of dharma that are shown, Dan, Shil, Tap, and Bhav, the first dharma that is shown is Dan dharma, which is primarily for a person to get rid of the attachment for wealth, and by funneling the wealth in different ways. So this doesn't mean that the acharyas of the Sangh or the trustees or the founders of the Shasan, the Tirthapati Bhagwans, are greedy for our wealth. They are just showing us ways in which we can get rid of our wealth while ensuring that the wealth that we have accumulated by way of pap goes to good kshetras. Again, before we talk about this, it's important to understand the caveat that only when you have wealth are you supposed to engage in dan dharma, but that doesn't mean that to engage in dan dharma you earn wealth. Which means that if you have wealth with you, what you should do is engage in dan dharma. But to say that, oh, I want to engage in dan dharma, which is why I am earning, or which is I'm running a business, or working the job that I work, that is not acceptable at all. Haribalda Sweshwari Maharaja in his Granth very clearly says that this is like, it's like an elephant saying, or a crazy person saying, oh, you know what, I want to clean myself off, so I'm going to step into the dirt first. I'm going to step into a pool of mud first. If a person has accidentally fallen into a pool of mud and they clean themselves, that's okay. But that doesn't warrant you. I mean, just because you want to cleanse yourself, that doesn't mean that you deliberately go into a pool of mud and dirty yourself, right? So the same has to be understood here. So when a Shravak has attained wealth, and this wealth is over and above what he needs for his basic survival. Now, basic survival, what we think and what the Sutrakar Bhagwans think are very different. So when we talk of food, clothing, and shelter, the Sutrakar Bhagwans set the bar very low, and our bars are skyrocketing. So when we talk of food, clothing, and shelter, the Sutrakar Bhagwans define the minimum standards of survival as just getting enough food to survive, enough warm food to survive. Clothing would be getting a piece of cloth to cover your to cover the lower part of your body and the upper part of your body, and shelter literally means a roof over your head. So as long as you have that, you can be happy. But if you have over and above that, the excess wealth that you have, to get rid of your lobe, to get rid of your parigraha sanya, you should direct it into different ways of dharma. Which is why the Shastrakar Bhagwans have done a great upkar by even showing us how to divide our wealth. And Panchasutra is perhaps one of the few granths where the proportions are also very clearly mentioned. So the Sutrakar Bhagwan specifies it in this manner. He says that when a person has attained an X amount of wealth, he divides it into 8 parts. Of those 8 parts, 1 part he uses in Dan Dharma, and 1 part he uses in Bhog, in getting all the essential pleasures that he wants. And this is not and this could be anything, everything from your skin care, your luxuries, your food, everything. Then he divides it into 4 other parts. 1 part he uses for the family, 1 part he saves, 1 part he invests, and in this manner he divides his wealth. So how much of an amount to save, how much of an amount to invest for the future, how much of an amount to spend on your family, how much to spend for your own self, and how much to spend for dan dharma. All of this is mentioned too. Now this is just a very general direction, because the Tikakar Bhagat himself specifies that if a Shravak can do more, then he should spend more than half of his wealth in dharma. So quite important to keep this calculation in mind. And I believe that if as Jains all of us were to plan our wealth in this manner, even when it comes to passing down generational wealth, if wealth was to pass down in this manner, which with directions from scriptures in this manner, things would be so different. So quite important to keep that in mind. Now the Sutrakar Bhagavan further says that having structured the wealth in this manner, he whenever he's doing a particular activity, or whenever he's free to himself and he has some time to think, he engages in mind in something that the Sutrakar Bhagavan says, taha tesu tesu samayaresu sai samannagaya siya. And the part continues, and the Sutrakar Bhagavan says that while doing all of these good achars of Shravak Dharma, that is Dan Dharma, etc., a Shravak constantly keeps his upyog focused. He ensures that his upyog is always present. His focus is not in some other third activity. While he's doing a particular activity, he'll only think of activity X, and while he's doing activity Y, he'll think of activity Y. So, now while doing all of these achars, a Shravak has good, he always has his upyog in there. So, this upyog, to give an idea of how one can attain focus in dharma kriyas, the Sutrakar Bhagavan gives very beautiful ways to structure this particular process of thinking. So I'll just read the part of Sri Panchasutra. Here it says, sure, I'll just post a picture in the group after this, the structuring of wealth. Amuge aham, amoga kule, amoga sise, amoga dhammat thanathiye, name tavya rahana, name tadarambho, buddhi mame yassa, eyamitha saram, eyamaya bhuyam, eyam hiyam, asaramannam sabam visesao, avihi ghanenam, vivaga darunam chatti, evamaha tiloga bandhu parama karunage, sammam sambuddhe, bhagavam arihantetti, evam samalochiya, tada viruddhesu samayaresu, sammam vatteja, bhava mangalameyam tannifattiye. So, the Aradhak here, he should always think of a few things. A few pointers are given here, and by thinking of these pointers slowly and gradually, and of course this is slowly and gradually provided we engage in these in these thoughts consistently on a daily basis. These are thoughts, anyone can do them at any given point. So it's not difficult to make out time for something like this. A Shravak, he sharpens his mind, his Atma, so much that it becomes razor edged, to cut through that granthi and accept Sarvavrti. So what thoughts are these? Amugeham, I am XYZ person. So he thinks of his name. That is, so the Tikakar Bhagavan, he gives an example by saying, I, for instance, I'm Devdutt. My name is Devdutt. And he thinks of this. So the hidden idea behind this is that in Arya nations, in Arya Desh, the practice generally is that the names that are given to a particular individual after they are born are also names that denote some particular virtue, right? Of course, this might not hold true today, because we have very absurd names today, even in Jain families, which make no sense at all. No one knows what the name means. It just sounds interesting, and people name their kids that. But we're not talking of that. I believe most of us present here have names with really good meanings. So the person thinks that I am a person endowed with so and so name, and with his name he thinks of the virtue that is associated with that name, and he thinks that it is the duty of Shishta Purush, of noble people, to practice the virtue that is present in their name. And I am born in a Shravak family, which is why I should always keep the the Swabhav of Jeev in mind, and I should ensure that I am able to accumulate and I am able to refine the virtue that is associated at least with my name. Because even if we look at our Tirthankar Bhagwans, all the Tirthankar Bhagwans, the names that were given to them by their parents are names that have some story or other behind it, right? So similarly with most names in the Arya nations. After that, the Shravak thinks Amuga Kule, that I am born in XYZ family, such as the Ikshvaku dynasty or this dynasty, that dynasty, because more or less, now this is more relevant when a Shravak knows the history of his family. If a Shravak doesn't even bother knowing the history of his family, where they've come from, or uh, what great Shravaks are present in their family. Now, forget the immediate family. Certain families might not have records, where they come from. But say your Oswal or Shrimal. What is the history behind Oswal Vansh? What is the history behind Shrimal Vansh? What is the history behind Porval Vansh? Where do these all come from? Who are the Acharya Bhagwans who are associated with the Upkar on these on these dynasties? How do they? What is the story by which they came about to be in existence? So when a Shravak knows all of this, only then does such a thought make sense, because he will think that, look, I am born in so and so family. Or if you want to narrow it down even further, you can say that I am born in so and so family, and you think of your immediate family and think that this is the family of a Shravak. So in accordance with the maryada of a family, that should suit and befit a Shravak, I should not engage in these activities for sure. And while engaging in some other activities, I should exercise extreme and abundant caution. Similarly, uh, and a very interesting point here to discuss, the Shravak also thinks Amuga Sise, that by way of dharma, I am the Shishya of so and so Acharya. The simple thing that this denotes again is that a Shravak must always be surrendered to an appropriate Guru Bhagwan. Because had this not been the case, the Sutrakar Bhagwan, and it's very clear that we're discussing the life of a Shravak right now, because Sadhu Dharma, taking Sadhu Dharma is going to be discussed in the at the end of the third sutra. We're in the second sutra where we're looking at Shravak Dharma right now. And yet, the Chintan that is given, a pointer for Chintan that is given here is Amuga Sise. Oh, look, I am the Shishya of so and so Acharya. Now, having, because I have a guru like this over my head, even out of shame, even out of embarrassment, I can definitely not engage in certain activities. So, even if a Shravak is going to engage in some activity of pop, he will think 100 times, because he knows that I am associated directly with this particular Guru Bhagwan. Palpable, because this is very clearly put in there. And this also suggests that it is very much encouraged for a Shravak to have a particular guru. When, for instance, a lot of people say that, oh, all Panch Mahavradhari sadhus are our Guru Bhagwans. Sure, and that should be the abhigam, that should be the approach. But there also needs to be a particular Guru Bhagwan who guides a Shravak on a day-to-day basis. Which is why there are so many Shastra parts which support this unconditionally, and this refutes the claim of people who say that it is not mandatory for a Shravak to have a particular guru, because this is not the case at all. Uh, and this is also understood by the term Amuga Sise. I am the Shishya of XYZ person. So Shravak, excuse me. So particular Shravak, he thinks of this daily. I am, I bear so and so name. I come from so and so family. My guru is so and so. I am the Shashya of so and so. And more importantly, and this is important for all of us who have taken even the tiniest niyam, the Shravak on a daily basis thinks of the different anuvrats, gunvrats, and shikshavrats that he has taken. He will think of all of his niyams. He will recollect them at least once in a day. Most of us take niyams and we even follow them to a certain extent, but we fail to recollect them, to think about them on a daily basis. Now, what thinking about them does is that it helps us it brings to our mind immediately that, look, I have these niyams to follow, and there is no way I can, violate them. So even by way of accident, it really reduces your chance of breaking that niyam. Secondly, when you recollect your niyam every day, you also recollect the bhav with which you took that niyam, which is why, your excitement, your your basically your commitment to practicing it, it gets revived again. You come back with the same mindset that you had at the time of taking it. And this is also why, even when we take samayik, or even when you're doing pratikraman, the pratigna of karimi bhante gets repeated uh, about thrice, because from time to time we need to be reminded of our vows. And similarly for sadhu bhagwans, they also take the pratigya of sarvavirti samayik, even then they recite karimi bhante several times a day. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Thereafter, a Shravak thinks that uh, the niyams or the dharma that I have accepted, it is not appropriate for me to violate them in any manner whatsoever. Which is why if I have to do any activity of the sansar, I will structure it in such a way that none of my vrats meet with any atichar. Now, look at the thinking process that is outlined here, and look at the way we think. Most of us would think the exact opposite. We would think that, look, I have so many commitments in life, I have XYZ plans. So if I have taken a niyam, if I've taken so and so niyam, I'm going to modify it to suit my convenience. Whereas the Panchasutrakar, Bhagwan, he suggests something totally opposite and contradictory to that. And truly, this thinking of ours is why our niyams are also stained heavily with atichars, and these atichars often don't get removed in time, and they penetrate deeper and deeper, and they result in anachar, that is breaking the vow altogether. After uh, after having thought this, the Shravak also thinks that the vrats that I have accepted, I am, I have not begun to violate them altogether. And having accepted them, he thinks that, look, the niyams that I took now, or the dharma that I took at so and so date, it is increasing day by day. So this is the way a Shravak is supposed to think. Now, such a thought can only be possible when the dharma that is taken by a Shravak actually increases day by day, right? So the Sutrakar Bhagavan, he very clearly says here that a Shravak thinks, look, the dharma that I have taken, that I took so and so, in so and so time period, has now enhanced so much. So this is because other time the Shravak took these niyams, took these vrats, anuvrats, gunvrats, and shiksha vrats. He took them with such a keen interest and excitement that right from that day onwards, he has tried his level best to ensure that there is no aticha, there is no virada, there is no skhalna in any of the vrats that he has taken. And by way of nourishing these vrats over and over, he has started increasing, his parinam have started increasing, his vishuddhi has started increasing, his atma dravya has started becoming cleaner and cleaner, and more, less ridden with pudgal, more endowed with the virtues of the atma. The virtues that he has have also become more refined. In addition to the virtues that have become more refined, there are also new virtues that have emerged, and these virtues that are new are also getting refined, and they're bringing along more and more virtues, which are reducing in turn more and more karma. So by this, we clearly see that the several stages which the Shastrakar Bhagavans refer to as conducts, the several grades of Deshvarti Samyaktva are, being ascended bit by the Shravak here. And this is only possible if we walk along the lines of what the Panchasutrakar Bhagavan says. Then the Shravak thinks again that in this entire sansar, the only one thing that is Sarbhut is the dharma that I have accepted. This reminds us of the words of Anand Shravak and Kamdev Shravak when they hear of the sadhu dharma from Mahaswami Bhagavan for the first time. They they are so convinced, their conviction is so strong that they immediately tell Paramatma, Aise Atthe, Aise Param Atthe, Sese Anatthe. This is Arthabhut, this is Param Arthabhut, and everything else is anarthabhut, everything else is worthless. This dharma that Paramatma has shown fully in the form of sadhu dharma is what is of essence in the sansar. And because a Shravak cannot practice it fully at this point, he still constantly thinks of himself that this is the only thing that is worth celebrating, worth keeping in this entire sansar. So, even though the Shravak is not as nirlep as the Sadhu Bhagwan, he understands, he accepts, and he fully embraces the fact that all sansaric pleasures, all bhogs, all earth and kam is worthless and of no, they're all futile. A Shravak then, the Shravak particularly, he then goes back and he thinks that these niyams that I have taken, this dharma that I have accepted, is Atma Bhut. It is it is intermingled with my Atma, because this is something that is going to come with me even in Parlok. It is This thing is the only element that is going to cause spiritual welfare for me. It is going to bring good paranam for me. And he thinks of how the entire contents of earth and calm are worth renouncing. And having thought all of that, now he, having engaged in this thought process, he brings a witness. He says that, look, I have thought this, but I'm going to bring Paramatma as my witness to this thought. So, in the beginning also we saw, there was a namaskar done to Paramatma in a very elaborate manner in the first sutra. Here again he brings Paramatma in picture and he says that Arihant Paramatma, who is like a brother to the Jeeves in all three worlds. Arihant Paramatma, who is the ocean of supreme Karuna. And Arihant Paramatma, who is like a treasure of the highest quality of punya in this entire sansar. Arihant Paramatma himself says this, and because of this conviction, I am again and again reiterating this thought process. I am making my Atma more and more refined. This is in this manner. So, the word he is used in Sanskrit, which means that this alone is what Paramatma says. Or Paramatma says this alone, any way you want to take it. So, having said that, he says that he now he now furthers his thinking, and by introspecting the different conducts that he's practicing in his day-to-day life, he 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 basically one ups his paranam dhara, and by doing this, by remembering Paramatma here once again, uh, this is a mangal. We saw what a mangal means in the beginning of the Granth. He once again does the bhav mangal in the form of namaskar to Paramatma, and by this bhav mangal he says that any hindrance that comes in my way, may it go away. Having thought that, he further thinks of how so he after engaging in his entire reflection, he thinks of his age. What is my age right now? Given my age, what is the appropriate duty for me? What should I be prioritizing now? How much time do I think I have remaining? Could death knock at my door anytime? And then he thinks further that these vishais, the pleasures of the five senses, are asar. Death is inevitable. I don't know where it is going to come. It is something that I can't get rid of, which is why dharma, and dharma is described here as the medicine to death, the cure to death. But what kind of dharma? Eganta Visuddho. That dharma which is Ekant Vishuddh, which is nothing and nothing but pure and supremely refined. Dharma which is free of any malice, any ulterior or wrong or inappropriate motive, free of any atichar. Eganta Visuddho, Ekant Vishuddh. Mahapurisa Sevio. That dharma which has not only been propounded or preached by Mahapurush, but which has also been practiced by Mahapurush. Mahapurusha Sevio, Savvahiyakari. That dharma which always, in all three times, does not change its form, and because of this reason, it always causes hit, it always causes kalyan to those who practice it. Nirayaro, Niratichar, Paramananda Heu. That dharma which is the cause of Param Anand, of supreme happiness. This category of dharma, this grade of dharma, is the one and only cure of death. And when this cure of death is practiced, all the disease of birth obviously automatically goes away. So in this manner, the Shravak, he, even just by way of his thought, he rises so high that it is no wonder that, by following the directions that are given in scriptures like these, so many Shravaks, countless Shravaks, without even having taken Dravya Charitra, they have attained Keval Gyan in the garb of a Shravak themselves. Although this is apvadik, very rare, there are countless examples of even Shravaks like these, because the thought process of a Shravak is also so pure and so indifferent from that of a sadhu. A sadhu and Shravak only have difference in conduct, but when it comes to a way of thinking, there is no difference virtually at all. Now, having said that, we come to the last part of this sutra, which is again in the form of a Mangal. The Granthkar Bhagavan says, Namo Emasya Dhammasya, Namo Eya Dhamma Payasayanam, Namo Eya Dhamma Palayanam, Namo Eya Dhamma Paruvayanam, Namo Eya Dhamma Pavajjaganam, Ichhami Ahaminam Dhammam Padivijjatye, Sammam Mana Vayana Kaya Jogehim, Ho Mameyam Kallanam Parama Kallananam, Jananam Anubhavao, Suppanihanam Evam Chinteja Puno Puno, Eya Dhamma Juttanam, Avavayakari Siya, Pahanam Mohachirnamevam, Evam Visujjamane Bhavanaye, Kammapagamenam, Uvei Eyasa Joggayam, Taha Sansara Viratye, Samvigye Bhavai Amame, Aparovayavi, Visuddhe, Visujjamana Bhaveti. And in this manner, the Sutrakar Bhagavan concludes the second sutra, which is the second Sadhu Dharma Paribhavana Sutram. Here, the Granthkar Bhagavan says, so in this sutra we saw the Swarup of Dharma in a very good manner. We saw a lot of adjectives, we saw a lot of metaphors, a lot of similes used to describe the Dharma of Janeshwar Paramatma. So, the Shravak, after thinking all of this, and after reading the sutra, he says, Namo Immasya Dhammasya. To this Dharma, I bow down. He further says, Namo Eya Dhamma Payasayanam. I bow down to the Prakashak of this Dharma. I bow down to those Upkari Bhagwans who have shown this particular Dharma. So, the Sarvagnya Bhagwant, who after retaining Keval Gyan showed this Dharma to me, he has done the greatest upkar ever known to mankind. And we also saw yesterday in the group how in the Tattvad Sutra, in the Bhashya of the Tattvad Sutra, in the introductory part itself, Uma Satiji Bhagwan says that there is no greater Dharma than preaching the Moksha Marg to people, to the world. And this greatest Dharma is practiced by Arihant Paramatma in the greatest manner. So, it is because of this Dharma being shown or being brought to light by Paramatma that the Shravak has a renewed respect and devotion for Arihant Paramatma, and he bows down to them because of this reason. So, when you bow down to Paramatma knowing the upkar that he has done, the respect and the feeling that we have is much more than an ordinary Dravya Namaskar, just physically bowing down, right? And then the Shravak says, Namo Eya Dhamma Palayanam. I bow down to those who are the palak, or those who are the practitioners, the observers of this Dharma, which is obviously not Shravaks, because Shravaks live a life of Dharma and Adharma both. He bows down to Sadhu Bhagwans here. And by doing Vandan, by doing Namaskar to the Yatis in this manner, this Shravak who is currently Nirlep, who is currently having an increased respect towards Sarvavarti Dharma, he destroys the karma that is lying on him, which is hindering him from accepting and practicing Sarvavarti. So, which is why the Namaskar to Panchaparmeshthi, we see that by doing Vandan to Dev Tattva and Guru Tattva, all Panchaparmeshthi is included here. By doing Vandan to Panchaparmeshthi, the one thing that we need is Karmakshay and Punyanubandhi Punya, which gives us the strength to practice Sarvavarti Dharma. So then the Shravak further says that I am, he bows down to the Sadhu Bhagwans, and after that he says that this dharma which has been accepted by Shravaks, etc., I bow down to them as well. Because even by bowing down to Shravaks, who are similar minded people on the same journey, he is basically, looking at a lot of other people like him, and he develops a sense of respect for them as well because they are on the same journey. They have the same respect for Dev and Guru Tattva. And then the Shravak thinks to himself, I am desirous of accepting this dharma. Now he has reached a stage where his manoraths are likely to be transformed from mere manoraths, mere desires, to actually becoming, parinam of taking Charitra Dharma. So, this Shravak says that I am desirous of taking Sarvavarti Dharma, which is why, or to practice which, I first accepted Deshvarti Dharma. So, here he's showing his inclination towards Sadhu Dharma, because everything that he does is ultimately to attain Sadhu Dharma at the earliest. And the Shravak here is not satisfied with merely changing clothes or just doing the external kriya of a sadhu. He thinks that he's actually all of this is spelled out in the Granth. He thinks that by way of taking Sadhu Dharma and by practicing Samyag Man Vachan Kaya Yoga, I will make my mind so nirlep that I will be able to practice Sarvavarti Dharma at the fullest. And by this special resolution, Pranidhan, the word we have heard 100 times in this Granth, by this Pranidhan, his Pakshapat towards the Mahavrats of a Sadhu Bhagwant increases by leaps and bounds every day that he thinks to, he sits to think this. And slowly, by engaging in such contemplation, the strength of his resolution increases the strength of his Atma. And slowly he starts accumulating every possible capacity that he needs to build up to take Sadhu Dharma. Here, the Granthkar Bhagwant also says that the Shravak knows that Sarvavarti Dharma is extremely difficult to follow. If we look at Anand Ganji Maharaja's words in the Stavan of Anantan Bhagwan himself, he says, Dharatala Varani Sohili Dohili Chaudama Jinatani Charana Seva. The complete seva of Tirthankar Paramatma, that is by following their Agnya to the fullest, that is by practicing Sarvavarti Samayik, it is more difficult than walking on the edge of a sword. And Anand Ganji Maharaja, sorry Naman, is that something you were saying? Alright. So
No, it was by mistake.
no worries. So he attains the strength in this manner. And having said this, there's a very interesting sentence put in this contemplation further. He thinks rather, that may I obtain the anugraha, or by way of the anugraha, the kripa or the grace of Janeshwar Bhagwant, who are the source of Param Kalyan, may I attain the Sadhu Dharma, which is the source of Param Kalyan. Okay, very interesting usage of words. He says that by the anugrah of Janeshwar Paramatma, who are the hetu, the karan, the cause of Param Kalyan, may I engage, or may I, attain Sadhu Dharma, Sarvavarti Samayik, which itself is the cause of Param Kalyan. So, here the Shravak knows that by resolving again and again in this manner, even though Sarvavarti Samayik or Charitra is extremely difficult to practice, by way of the grace of Paramatma, I will attain it and I will be able to practice it as if it were child's play. So, here the question, there's an obvious question here, and a lot of people have this question when the Dev Tattva of Jin Shasan is not clearly known to them. that Paramatma does not do anugraha on anyone. He does not shower compassion on anyone. So why is the Shravak saying, or why is the Shravak thinking that may I attain such kalyan by the anugraha or the grace or the blessings of Jineshwar Bhagwant? So here the Tikakar Bhagwan clarifies by saying that by doing a pranidhan of this sort, uh, it is the Shravak who by his own effort, by his own intention, by his own deed is obtaining the requisite sarvavati that he wants to obtain, or the requisite welfare, spiritual welfare that he wants to obtain, but with Bhagwan as the nimit. Because the anugraha, the compassion of Paramatma is constantly showering. It is our receptivity that needs to be opened up. We need to, ameliorate our receptivity, our openness. We need to expand ourselves to receive that anugraha of Aryan Paramatmas. Arhantya is something that is present for everyone. It's not something that is exclusively given to someone else, but it is only by the Jeev's own yogyata that Jeev is able to receive it. Which is, if you see, uh, this entire concept of Ishwar Anugraha, of Bhagavad Anugraha, the Anugraha, or uh, the grace of Bhagwan, it is so beautifully portrayed in Upmati Bhaprapanch Katha. Uh, uh, for everyone who, I believe everyone knows the context of the characters in Upmati Bhaprapanch Katha. When the beggar, that is the metaphor for the own Atma, when the Dramak, the beggar, is knocking at the doorstep, he's at the doorstep, at the staircase of the palace of this particular king, Susthit Maharaja, which is a metaphor for Tirthankar Paramatma himself. Susthit Maharaja, in his knowledge, is seeing the entire world, living and non-living. And there is there's a watchman at the gate, the uh, uh, the guardian of the king's palace, and this guardian, this Dwarpal, he's not letting the beggar come in because look at his clothes, look at his condition. Why would such a person be let into the king's kingdom? And you know, there have been several instances in the past wherein this particular beggar who has no food to eat, who has no clothes to wear, who's stinking, who is completely diseased, in such a sorrowful, pitiable, and disgusting state, he's come at the staircase of this particular palace, and the Dwarpalis never let him in before. This particular instance, however, uh, the the king, Susthit Maharaja, who is none other than the embodiment of Tirthankar Bhagwan, he casts his sight on that particular beggar from the top of his palace, from the terrace. And the guardian just happens to notice that, oh look, this particular king has cast a sight on him. And that is when the guardian opens the doors of this particular palace for the beggar, by which he enters the palace. And all of this, everything here, every character, every entity here is a metaphor. The Dwarpal is uh, is basically the hindrance of karma. So this particular karma vivar, he moves aside. He lets the jeev, that is the beggar, enter the palace, which is nothing else but the Jin Shasan. When can a person attain Jin Shasan? It is by his own yogyata, but with this yogyata, a very important factor that is important is Bhagavad Anugraha. The Anugraha, the Karuna, the compassion, the grace of Tirthankar Paramatma. When a particular Atma attains this grace of Paramatma, when the grace of Paramatma showers on him, or when rather the Atma becomes ready to receive the grace of Aryan Paramatma, it is only then that a person attains or gets entry inside the Janshasan. And this obviously was a very dumb, very mute, and very stupid attempt at even paraphrasing the words of Upmati Bhaprapanch Katha. If you want to read the actual description in Upmati Bhaprapanch Katha, please read it. Just that particular excerpt. It is so beautifully put in there. So the Shravak here thinks that by way of the anugraha of Aryan Paramatma, may I attain sadhu dharma. Having said this, he further thinks, may I become someone who's endowed with sadhu dharma, and may I start engaging myself in the agnya of the sadhu bhagavans. Whatever the sadhu bhagavans say, may I become their agnyakari. May I start doing everything that they direct, because everything is only possible when a person takes diksha. And here, a very important sentence, as if it were a proverb, is mentioned that pradhanam moha chedanam etat tadagya karitvam. That the being agnyakari of the sadhu bhagavans, being agnyakari of the guru bhagavan, is the primary instrument of ripping moha apart. If you want to destroy moha, the most useful instrument in that is just following the agnya of the sadhu bhagavans. And in this manner, the shravak, by way of kushal abhyas, he becomes efficient in training his mind. The words are very important; they are not to be dismissed, casually. By way of this kushal abhyas, the atma becomes vishuddhyamano vishuddhyaman. He becomes purer and purer, and this atma, who is the sevak of the Guru Bhagavan's agnya and who practices the reflections as shown above, slowly and slowly, what happens to him? He, the entire sansar that he was clinging on to by way of different dosh, he becomes detached from this sansar bit by bit. And earlier he only knew the swarup of the sansar. Now, having known the swarup of the sansar, he is also able to get rid of this sansar bit by bit. He becomes samvigna. His mind is now only playing in attaining moksha. He becomes free of mamatva. He becomes free of attachment. He engages in every possible action that he can to save other jeeves from any form of pida. And the granthi, the knots of raga and dvesh that he has so far, he starts breaking them further and further. And the intensity of moha that is present in him, he breaks that further as well. Earlier, to attain samyak darshan, the jeev had to do granthi bhed. That is to cut through, penetrate or chop off the knot of intense raga and dvesh. To attain charitra dharma, that is sarvavati charitra, you need to step up your game again and destroy another another grade of intensity of raga and dvesh in the form of another set of 4 kashayas. And by doing that, he attains he further becomes more and more vishuddhaman. Vishuddhaman is the term used here. And finally, every day he plays in this vishuddhaman bhav, and with this bhav, a shravak thinks, today I will take Sanyam. And he tries his level best to do it, fails, doesn't lose hope, wakes up again tomorrow and thinks, today is the day, I'm going to take Sanyam. And by engaging in such thought, whenever or as soon as he comes across the right nimit, could be in the form of the right opportunities or the right circumstances, external circumstances, because internally he's ready, he pounces upon the opportunity and he accepts sadhu dharma. And when he accepts this sadhu dharma, obviously because of the parinam with which he's accepting it, he becomes a bhav sadhu. And this process of reaching a stage wherein you can attain the parinam to accept charita dharma, that is sadhu dharma paribhavana. That is in the form of practicing the 12 vrats of a shravak, and in the form of taking all the necessary measures shown in this granth to protect, preserve, and increase the gun associated with these 12 vrats. And with this, we conclude the second sutra. The third sutra talks of another thing altogether. The third sutra contemplates a situation wherein a shravak is completely determined to take diksha. He is mentally prepared. He has his goals straight, and he knows that there is no other motive or purpose in sansara. I have to take diksha in this birth. Such a shravak, what does he do to take diksha? What is the process from becoming vairagi to actually becoming a sadhu bhagavant? What steps do you have to go through? do you have to seek permission from your family? If your family says yes, great. If your family says no, what do you do? How do you convince them? If you are unable to convince your family, can you still leave them and take Diksha? Can children take Diksha? All of this is contemplated very well with a lot of interesting arguments back and forth in the third sutra. We'll look at them in the next Svadhyaya session. If there's any questions at this juncture, please feel free to share them.
Pranam Parsho. Shreyansh asked a question in the chat previously.
Okay. Which one is it? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Why is it different from 25% classification? That way.
Because the 25% classification, so both the mat that are present, there are two opinions in this regard. Both of them are discussed in the Sutra and the Tika. I'll share the bifurcation in both ways. The 8 categories are nothing else but a further division of the 4, so there's no need to worry there. Are there any other questions? So, okay, to answer your question, the very first thing that the sutra talks in this regard, in the section, the second sutra, it opens up by saying, get rid of the company of Kalyan Mitras, and it talks of several ways by which you can secure yourself. In any case, when complete removal of Kalyan Mitras is not possible, you surround yourself with Kalyan Mitras, who you're always in touch with. Surround yourself with the company of Guru Bhagwan, surround yourself with the company of Shravaks, who are also on the path, on the right track. Continue doing Svadhyaya consistently, because doing Svadhyaya consistently is also one of the 15 steps of Adhyatma Prapti as enlisted in Udesh Rahasya. I'm sure Ashish Bhai remembers this. We saw this I think about 2 years ago. The 15 steps of Adhyatma Prapti are also very important to keep in mind here, because all of these steps are essentially, they overlap in one way or the other, but they're all to secure our Atma from the influence of bad nimitz. So while bad nimitz are present, what you can do is withdraw from them as much as possible. But when the Atma itself is not does not want to give up bad nimitz, then you're helpless to that extent. To the extent that you give them up, you benefit. Well, is there anything else? You're welcome. Seeing none, we'll end this Svadhyaya here. Once again, pranam to everyone, and thank you for joining. Yes, Yash?
Thanks. No, I'm just saying
great.
pranam. Thanks. Yeah.
Ashish bhai, how are you? I've been hearing from you after forever.
Oh yeah, I'm good. How are you?
We're all good. We haven't seen you or heard from you forever.
Ashish, your phone number changed?
Oh yeah, actually I moved to Australia, and because of the time difference, usually previous Svadhyaya sessions, at my pace it's around 2-3 a.m. So that's why I couldn't attend. But this time definitely works for me. So if possible in the future, if you can
Okay.
set around this
What
time.
city are you in?
Sydney.
Oh, Sydney. Okay.
Yeah. It's like 4 hours of difference. 4 hours ahead of India.
Right. Okay. Are you coming to India anytime soon?
Planning this year December, not sure, but want to come desperately.
Well, if you do it,
is your number changed?
Yes, my number changed. Yeah. Yes, my number changed. I'll message you. You can just see it.
If you're coming to India in December, come with us to Punjab and Himachal Pradesh, Kangra Tirth, for a week.
Great, you all are planning the trip?
Yeah, it's going to be like, I think, about more than 100 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are the dates fixed? Dates and itinerary?
Yes, 20th to 28th December.
Okay.
I think mostly that. I think I need to check, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll definitely try. But also share the itinerary and like.
Done. I'll do that.
I'll try my best.
Pranam, Ashish, It's so good to see you back. I just want to tell you that you said like you have missed the sessions due to your timing. You can get the recording from Arpit Bhai. We have
Oh, yeah,
recorded
sure.
like almost all the sessions.
Yeah, I was going to ask Yash because I know that we
Yeah.
usually record sessions, but definitely
Yeah.
we'll get it from Arpit Bhai.
Right.
Is the sung around you, Ashish?
Oh yes, there is
Oh,
Sydney
is
Sun,
it
yes.
close to you?
Yeah, it's just like an hour distance. So Derasar is going to be built. So there was a Pratishta in Shahpur.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yashoj
In
Sirji.
January, like December,
Yeah,
January.
I know what you're talking about.
Did you attend it?
No, but I know people who did.
Okay. So Murnayak is Parshvanath Bhagwan.
Right, right.
So all the activities like Ampil and Samvatsari, all activities have been done here. It's a large, so like maybe around 500 people.
Oh, okay, that's big.
Yes.
And we cook all the Ambel food by ourselves.